From the studios of Foxboro Cable Access, located in the center of Foxborough, Massachusetts, you are watching Around Foxborough.
Hi, I'm your host, Tim Green, and welcome to Around Foxborough. Tonight I have with us Kostas Loukos, who's running for state representative in Massachusetts. How are you tonight, Kostas?
Good. I'm happy to be here, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to local politics?
Yeah. So I first got involved in public service at a very young age, but we'll go even further back to when I was a young kid. When I was in third grade, it was discovered that my older brother and I are dyslexic. So we were in the I was in the third grade, he was in the fourth grade. And I was reading at a first grade reading level. And at the time, there was a rule from the Department of Education that if you were making the same educational growth as your classmates, you didn't qualify for outside of school day support. And the problem was we were making the same growth as our classmates, but at a first grade reading level, so I was never going to be making the necessary growth with my classmates to be able to graduate and go to college. I was fortunate enough to have my mom and my dad who were able to advocate for me and eventually pay out of pocket to send us to tutoring twice a week in Rhode Island to overcome that dyslexia, and that kind of set me on a path towards public service because I understand that government's complex. It often takes a lot of time and a lot of money to be able to navigate through it, whether you're a small business owner starting off or someone who's trying to navigate the unemployment process or somebody who's just trying to learn and advocate for themselves on the local level here with zoning changes or anything like that. So I want to serve as that advocate and that middle person for our residents here in our community and help them navigate government.
Okay. And what professional experience do you have maybe that would help you become the state representative and would do a great job with that?
Yeah, so I have a lot of experience in state and municipal governance. I served in 3 legislative offices up at the State House with Representative McMurtry, Representative Barrows, and Representative Scanlon, doing various things in their offices. Each office I kind of did something different, which was nice because I learned a lot about what the legislature does, whether that's constituent services or direct work with legislation and summarizing legislation to help the rep out. And professionally, I work in regulatory compliance with the Gaming Commission. So we go into the 3 licensed casinos in Massachusetts and we perform different types of audits.
This is your full-time job now?
Yes,
Yep.
Yes, it is. And I've also served in Mansfield on various boards, the Conservation Commission, the Industrial Development Commission currently, and I was formerly the town moderator in Mansfield. I was elected when I was 21 years old. I did that for 2 terms, and it was a really great way to learn about town government and really see where the rubber hits the road in terms of government, especially up here in New England.
And what are some of the key issues in your campaign?
Yeah, I built my campaign on three pillars. Number 1 being childcare. Because we know here in Massachusetts, it costs an average of $20,000 to send a kid to daycare. And that's just 1 kid for 5 days.
I have 2 of them in there now. It's not cheap.
So you understand.
I certainly do.
Number 2 being housing, because we know it's expensive to buy a house. We were just talking about that earlier. Yep. Whether you're buying your first house, these prices are through the roof. Young people can't afford them, or whether you're a senior or somebody who's retired, you can't afford to stay in the community that you helped build because you're being priced out because of these increasing costs and thusly increasing property taxes. So I want to come up with a couple plans to decrease the minimum lot size required to build homes here in the Commonwealth, because in some communities it's as much as 4 acres, to help spur up new construction for small single-family homes, and also increase the senior circuit breaker tax so that our seniors and retired folks can apply and get a little bit of a tax break on their property taxes.
Okay, back to your first point about childcare. What exactly would you do to help the burden on some of these?
So there's a couple pieces of legislation in the State House right now regarding childcare, and I'd like to see them passed into law. Number 1, income-based assistance with childcare, because if somebody is struggling to make ends meet, we don't want to put that extra burden of childcare costs on them. When in the 1st Bristol District, about 48% of households make less than $75,000 a year, which means that if you have 2 kids, more than half of your income is being spent towards childcare. So making sure that we're better funding childcare and creating programs that are income-based, but eventually I'd like to see a system where childcare is incorporated at a much younger, or education is incorporated at a much younger age. I mean, we have publicly funded K through 12 schools. I'd like to see that extend down a little bit to younger kids, because really what we're doing is two things here. We're stunting the growth of kids who can't get into childcare and who can't get into early education and learn and be around peers of their same age, but we're also stunting people's economic success and their personal career growth, because people are deciding it's not worth it for me to keep working when I have to pay $40,000 a year in childcare.
Right.
That's what my take-home pay is after taxes. So I might as well just stay home and watch my kids, which is great. But then when they get older, and they can be on their own.
Personally, I know my mother dealt with that,
Yeah.
being a stay-at-home mom, and then ended up working over at Hilliard's House of Candy in Easton, and which is great. But it's so expensive to live now that it's tough that were to happen.
Absolutely.
What changes would you like to see in education?
So in education on the K through 12 level?
No, more towards like after, do you have is there anything that you would like to see changed in the educational system as a whole? Or?
Yeah, well, I think right now what a lot of the communities in the Commonwealth, and especially the 1st Bristol District, are struggling with is unfunded mandates from the legislature when it comes towards different types of rulings and rules from the Department of Education. And we're coming off of COVID. I know it's 4 years after COVID, but we're still feeling a lot of the financial pressures of that. Some of those being that a lot of these communities use different grant money and American Rescue Plan funds to be able to help pay for those unfunded mandates. Well, now that American Rescue Plan money is dissipating, towns are getting less money. So they're struggling as those folks are starting to come on the normal operational payroll of the communities to be able to pay for those. So I'd like to see the legislature take a break from unfunded mandates regarding education, so we can give our educators in our school districts and our communities a chance to catch up financially and be able to really allocate money appropriately in the community and cover different programs of that nature. That's priority number one. I think until that's done, it would be unnecessary to create more unfunded mandates on our school districts, because as I mentioned to you earlier, Mansfield is having a conversation regarding a potential operational override, 2.5 override. So we don't want to add more stress onto that budget when the budgets are already very strained.
Okay. And earlier you had mentioned small businesses.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans for them to help them kind of with these? We see these big box stores going up in every corner.
Yeah. So I'm the son of a small business owner. My grandfather came to the United States in 1977. With my dad. His first winter was actually the blizzard of 1978.
Not a great year for.
Which was funny.
Where did he come from?
He came from Greece.
Okay.
And so my grandfather and my dad ended up starting a small business, and I grew up, talking about the business and being in the business at a young age. So that's something that's very important to me. In the legislature this last session, there was an economic development bill which was going to allocate millions of dollars for this region and the state in terms of economic development for small businesses. So there was some money earmarked in there regarding startup biotech companies with the Mass Bio Incubator over in Mansfield over on 495. So making sure that in the legislature we're passing bold policy to help folks protect their civil rights, but also making sure that we're passing these big economic development bond bills to help allocate some more funds to our districts in terms of grant funding for small businesses, for research funding and things of that nature.
Okay. We have some interesting questions obviously on the ballot this year.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to talk about or anything you're passionate about on those questions?
Yeah, well, I think I've been asked a lot about question one, so I'd like to touch on that a little bit, in my opinion, regarding that. Question one, for the folks at home who don't know yet, would provide the state auditor the right to audit the legislature. I think that it's important to allow the citizens of the district decide that question. Ultimately, I'm running to hopefully be in the legislature, but I would like the district and the state as a whole to make that decision, because I think it's important. People have a right to know what's going on in their legislature, and if the people feel that it's not transparent enough, then they should be voting on that ballot measure, and hopefully the outcome will help them get more clarity in terms of state government. I know there's some issue there regarding the legality of it, but that's for folks in the courts to decide whether or not it's legal. Question 2, which is the repeal of MCAS, I think is important and something that my opponent and I differ on. I would like to see MCAS repealed as a graduation requirement. Here in Massachusetts, we already have a graduation requirement set forward by the Department of Education. It's a pretty rigorous requirement. We know that the Massachusetts schools, public schools, are very well regarded across the country. We constantly rank as one of the most educated states in the country. And I think that MCAS is no longer serving its purpose. It's not used to help school districts. It's used as a way to punish school districts that aren't performing, and it's kind of arbitrary. In school, I was an A/B student, and when the MCAS results would come in at the beginning of the new year, I kind of struggled with MCAS, and I think that it puts a lot of stress on 15-year-old kids as to whether or not they're going to be able to graduate. I think it's a good metric, a good way to gauge how districts are doing, but I don't think it's necessary to keep it as a graduation requirement. So I'll be voting yes to repeal that one.
Okay.
So
again, back to the small businesses. Obviously, question 5. There's a
Yeah.
lot going on with that. I think every time you drive by a restaurant, there's a sign to say no to it. Do you have a stance there at all, or?
Yeah, I wrestled with this one for a long time.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to a lot of folks. As I said, I'm the son of a small business owner, and it's a tough question because I want to see people get paid what they're worth.
Right.
I want to see folks be able to go home at the end of the day and pay for their business,
Right.
Pay for their day-to-day needs, their houses, their,
Yeah, I mean,
their groceries.
you have a slow shift, and you're still making your wage, right?
Right.
There's two sides to that coin for sure.
Right. So I will most likely be voting yes to support it because at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to stop me from continuing to tip. I think that it's important that we recognize that $15 an hour does not get you very far in today's society.
Sadly, no.
And at the end of the day, whether I'm paying 20% on top of my meal to directly support somebody's higher wage through a tip or support their higher income through a wage increase, I think is important. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of time between now and November. I want to talk to more people who are servers and who are
Yeah.
bartenders because I think it's a really important, and there's a lot of different angles.
There are, for sure.
But as of right now, the folks who I've talked to, I plan to vote yes.
Oh, yes, yeah. I guess the other side of that coin would be that, the restaurants say that, the cost could go up, astronomically if this does pass through, and, we'll see, I guess, right? November will tell us.
Right.
I believe one of your other focus points was organized labor, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, how have you worked with the unions and things like that?
So where I work at the Gaming Commission, I worked with a couple co-workers to organize and to get union cards signed and to organize our labor union where I work.
Okay.
And we're currently going through the process of negotiating our first contract. And I think that organized labor is a great way to allow workers in communities like ours to exercise their right to earn higher wages and to get benefits. I think that sometimes unions get a bad rap, but I don't think that should be the case. I think they really do have a lot of different programs to help train people. If you're a tradesman and you're a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician,
Yeah.
they'll help you get that training. But it helps you have a stronger group when you go in to ask for your wage. It's not you going in and asking your boss,
No.
Hey, I've worked here for 20 years, can I have 4% COLA, please? You get that in a contract, guaranteed your 1%, 2%, 3% COLA every single year, which is good for the worker. It's good for folks to be able to collectively bargain. And it does so much more than just increase wages. I mean, there's measures in there for worker safety. If you work in a place that might be a little bit dangerous, any sort of trade where you risk injury, there are protections in there that will allow you to be safe at work and have the right equipment. And we have unions are responsible for a lot of the things that we benefit from today, the 4-day work week. The 40-hour work week.
Right.
And even a weekend, having a set weekend. Those are things that unions really brought into the forefront at the turn of the century.
What sets you apart from maybe some of the other candidates?
Well, I think my experience in government definitely sets me apart from my opponent. As I said, I've been involved since I was 17, 18 years old. I've voted in almost every single election, which I think is very important. if you elect somebody who doesn't vote often, how do you expect them to go to the legislature and vote often for you? As I said, I served in the legislature, and we know that the Massachusetts legislature is very, very complex. We don't have time for on-the-job training. We need somebody who can go in and who can do the job and who can bring resources home for Foxborough and for Mansfield and for Norton. And I think part of that element goes into, my ability to work with other legislators. I've already built these relationships with different representatives in the area, our state senator, folks who will help pass legislation and help support our budget earmarks to help us be able to pay for our parks and different community programs. And I think, being a young person and not just seeing these issues, but living these issues that everyone's facing right now is important. I understand the high costs in childcare. I don't have kids yet, but that's an inhibiting factor for people who have kids.
Of course, buying a home is the first, right.
Exactly. I bought my home a year ago, so I understand. And, education, just coming out of college and taking a while to find a job out of college and seeing folks around me who have, master's degrees unable to work. That's why I'm advocating for people to go to VOTEC education and to increase that classroom space, because we know that college isn't the only way to get a good paying job.
No, it certainly isn't. I think it's more apparent now than ever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have anything in the first 100 days, if you were elected, that you'd like to see done?
It's tough because Massachusetts is one of the slowest legislatures in the
Fair
country.
enough.
We consistently pass our budget
How about
last.
150 days?
Number one priority for me would be immediately helping our district, meeting with the 3 select boards, our town managers, and seeing what their priorities are in terms of budget earmarks for that immediate immediate budget session.
Yep.
The window to file legislation is very short. I believe it's until February or March that you have to file legislation up at the State House in that first session. So that's what a lot of the work will be, assigning on to different pieces of legislation with other reps, but also writing legislation for childcare policy and for education. Whether or not that legislation gets passed is up to the body as a whole, and the Speaker holds a good amount of authority there as to what gets voted on. But my immediate plan would be working with the 3 communities in the 1st Bristol District to make sure that when I put in for a budget earmark for our community, that it's something that we need to fund a project in Mansfield that maybe takes some money off the books or here in Foxborough, so that when it comes time to town meeting or to craft our town budgets in March, April, May, and June, that there's a little bit less stress off of the community. And I also advocate for more funds for our community in terms of the budget process as a whole. We know that the migrant crisis has put a huge strain on the 3 communities. So making sure that we down here in the 1st Bristol District are getting our fair share to help, subsidize that cost in the budget, to make sure that we are still giving our kids the same education at school, and we're still able to provide the public safety and public services that we're providing with our police, fire, and our trash and whatnot.
I know that's been obviously a hot topic, everything going on with the migrants.
Yeah.
Do you have a stance on that, or the way that you've seen that go?
Yeah, so it's a tough issue.
It certainly is.
There's no way, two ways about it. Ultimately, it's a issue of the federal government. Immigration is a responsibility that the federal government has in the Constitution, and the inaction of the federal government has made it very difficult on communities in Massachusetts. We're a right to shelter state that got passed and signed into law by a Republican governor in the 80s. And so this is something that we've had for a while. Ultimately, to qualify for right to shelter, you have to have a kid. And I'm not in favor of sending kids to sleep on the street, especially as we're going into the cold months. I would like to see the federal government do a better job at passing legislation regarding immigration, but we ultimately know that presidential politics and party politics came into play, and the former president was lobbying folks on Capitol Hill saying not to vote for this bipartisan piece of immigration policy that came out of the Senate because it's an election issue for him. So when we see that sort of heartless politicking going on behind the scenes, it's difficult to be able to solve the issue here in Massachusetts, because as I just said, we don't want to see kids on the street. Nobody does. So we have the decision to make, which is to extend a helping hand and to help kids assimilate and have the things that they need to get through the winter, or say you're on your own. which I know that our three communities are not about. So I would like to see the federal government pass work authorization for these folks so we can get them working and fill a much needed gap in our economy. I mean, anywhere you go, you'll see help wanted signs. So making sure that we can get people to work and on their own terms so they can leave the shelters and enter the workforce.
Okay. And if people wanted to find you, where would they find you?
Yeah, so I'm easy to reach. My website, votecostas.com, has my email address and my phone number on there, and I encourage people to email me with questions or to give me a call. My phone rings all the time now, probably more than it should, but I answer any phone call I get. It's very important to me to have these conversations with folks, and also my Facebook page, Kostas Loukos for State Representative. There's a lot of great information on there, and same thing with my website. I have my policy points on there as well as list of endorsements of different organizations that have supported me.
Okay. And is there anything that you'd like to tell maybe the viewers just about yourself or what kind of you stand for?
Yeah, ultimately I've dedicated my life to public service. This is not something that I woke up one day and decided that I wanted to do. I've interned in different legislative offices. I've served on countless boards in Mansfield. I was elected as a town moderator, and I'm only 25 years old. I'm a young guy, and I've been at this for 8 years already. I plan to, if elected, to serve the three communities diligently and to always be accessible to them and to always fight for their needs, because that's something that's important to me. As I said in the beginning, seeing my parents advocate for me really spurred me into public service. And now I want to do that for the folks of Foxborough, Mansfield, and Norton, because our government is so complex and because things are so difficult right now for people in our communities financially. And I think that I'm the right person for the job. I know the people in the building. I know how the building operates, and I'll be able to be effective on day one.
Okay. Well, Kostas, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
This was Around Foxborough, and I'm your host, Tim Green, and thank you so much for watching. Good night.